Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's live presentation on Unlicensed to Kill, why MVRs are a key component of every fleet safety program. We've got a lot to cover here in a short period of time. We're going to try to keep this around 30 minutes, so we'll move right along. Just quickly put a face to a name. I'm Rich Sordahl. I'm responsible for marketing at Driver's Alert. And just a little bit about us. We have more than 1,500 customers and 350,000 plus vehicles under contract. And that translates into literally millions of documented unsafe driving events. We also are a trusted partner for 100 plus companies in the insurance industry. But the common theme over the 27 years of our existence since our inception in 1989 is innovation. We were one of the pioneers in the 1-800 How's My Driving industry. And along the way, over those years, we were responsible for 4 or 5 firsts as well within that industry. We're also the first company to offer a closed-loop corrective action process using e-learning to go beyond just identifying and documenting unsafe driving events to actually improving driver behavior by marrying that e-learning based on incident-specific events with our How's My Driving and our telematics program. We're also the first company to provide a safety-based telematics application which goes beyond just looking at the vehicle, which would be miles per gallon, route optimization, things of that nature, to really focusing on the driver, because we do believe that when it comes to fleet safety, the driver is the biggest variable. We've also just recently launched Next Generation e-learning. It's the newest, freshest content in the industry. And what we're here to talk about today, motor vehicle record monitoring. We're on the verge really of releasing the most comprehensive solution in the business. So really taking it beyond just doing a once a year MVR poll whenever you need to look at a driver's record, to really monitoring your drivers over the period of a year in and year out on a monthly basis to really see if there's any change in status from violation, DUI, to something like a suspended license, so really helping you stay abreast of what's going on with your drivers and their safety. So something to really keep in mind as you hear Dr. Kirsch discussing the topic today is the possibility of how many of your employees right now might have received a traffic citation this year and you're just simply not aware of it. We have been now probably in the middle of a 2-year project based on market feedback to really study how the monitoring solution works for MVRs, to come up with the best possible solution, all in one, one-stop shop, if you will, that simplifies the process and really gives you the best coverage possible. So we've learned a lot, as you imagine, over those 24 months, and really want to pass on that knowledge to you in this presentation to help you close what we're calling that MVR gap, which is, you pull an MVR today and then there's still 364 days left in the year. That's a lot of time for things to change in one's driving record. So that's really the impetus for today's presentation and what the monitoring solution can do for you. This is an unfortunate incident, but it is timely considering the topic of today. This happened in Louisiana. An unlicensed bus driver was transporting flood recovery workers from New Orleans to Baton Rouge on Interstate 10, and he killed, unfortunately, 2 people, including a firefighter, and he injured 36 others when he ran into a parked fire truck that was on the side of the highway, assisting a previous accident that day. So, in addition to just thinking about the costs associated with bent metal and injuries, just imagine the exposure to liability, just the litigation that would result from something of this magnitude, and how simple this could be avoided by staying on top of your driver's MVR reports. So why are we here today? Everybody's heard the statistic, 1 out of every 5 of your vehicles in your fleet will be involved in an accident on an annual basis. We think this number is way too high, and all of the solutions in the Driver's Alert portfolio are all designed to help you lower the statistics significantly. We do also believe that there's some basic components that are part of every successful fleet safety program, and those include 1-800 How's My Driving program, using e-learning to be proactive and reactive with your training, and is also, of course, today's topic, motor vehicle records. Now, MVRs are not a one-and-done type project. Even if you have CDL holders, once a year we just don't think is enough, because, again, there's that MVR gap. There's that period of time between now and when you pull the next MVR. So overall, we want to help you better understand how to leverage MVRs and help you improve driver safety in your fleet. And of course, close that MVR gap. So today's goals, Dr. Kirsch is going to go over the why about MVRs and what the risks are if you don't run them. And then he's going to discuss how often you should pull an MVR, and then talk a little bit about the state-to-state nuances with respect to MVR reporting. And then, of course, the great question is, well, what happens if there is a change to one of your driver's records? What do you do? What's the next step? And then we're going to open it up to questions using the online chat feature, and, of course, finish it off by announcing the Starbucks gift card winner. So with that said, Dr. Ron Kirsch has 30-plus years experience in the occupational health and safety industry. He's a true icon, having published numerous articles on OHS, risk management, and hazard communication that have appeared in leading trade journals such as Occupational Health and Safety, Safety and Health, the Journal of Workers' Compensation, and Safety Matters. Dr. Kirsch is also the architect and project leader responsible for making Driver's Alert's MVR monitoring solution the most comprehensive in the industry. So with that said, I will turn it over to Dr. Kirsch. Doctor?
Thanks, Rich. I guess that's your kind way of saying I'm old. And anyway, I appreciate everyone for being on the webinar today. And we're going to jump right in here. So why run MVRs? MVRs tell a quick story, a snapshot of a driver's record and history. They have multiple purposes. They're used for pre-hire screening, and not just for your drivers. You invest a lot in hiring and training new drivers and new employees, and you can learn a lot about someone from their driving record. Are they really who they say they are? Are they dependable, reliable? Do you really want them in a company vehicle? Or for that matter, do you want them using their own vehicle on company business? MVRs are an annual regulatory requirement for your CDL holders. They're also required by many insurance carriers, and they're used for risk mitigation. MVRs are a really good predictive leading indicator for potential risk and loss for the future. And also for litigation protection. You've heard of negligent entrustment. That's where your actions can be considered negligent if you can't demonstrate your due diligence in vetting your drivers or other employees. Remember the bus driver that Rich mentioned in Louisiana who was driving without a license. This is an area of the law where the process that you use is equally important to the results. And I don't know if you've heard about vicarious liability, but that's another area of risk and exposure. That's where your employees can be held negligent for the actions of the employee. As Rich mentioned, 1 out of 5 or 20% of your vehicles will be involved in an incident each year. And notice that I didn't use the term accident, because we know that 90% of crashes are due to poor driver behaviors and decisions. And according to AAA, on average, 14% of drivers carry an invalid license. That's an extremely alarming statistic, and I'll share a couple of stories about that here in a few minutes. And on average, there's approximately 1.5 million DUI arrests each year. And guess what? If their job involves driving a vehicle, it's not likely that they're going to self-report that DUI event. So what are you missing? You've heard the expression, you don't know what you don't know. Well, it's very applicable to MVRs. What about license suspensions that are due to alimony or child support payments being late? A lot of times you can get suspensions from your license for non-moving violations or something not even related to a motor vehicle. And how about diversion? Driver safety schools, pretrial intervention. Drivers with prior convictions can hire attorneys and seal or expunge their records, so you the records don't even appear on an MVR. And in most cases, the only way you can remove violations from a driving record is by the passage of time. However, states have different policies and procedures for expunging violations from a driving record. And unfortunately, expungement cases are more frequent with employers who are required to have a CDL. And even though the federal motor carrier regulations require states to process driving violations as written and not allow expunging, masking, or deferring judgment or deviations from those records, some states choose not to follow that, or perhaps they're not aware of it. So those are big problems. So how often should you run MVRs? Well, upon hiring for all new hires that operate a company vehicle, that's really a best practice and not necessarily a requirement unless you're hiring a CDL position, but we strongly recommend that as a best practice. You should run them at least annually for all your CDL holders. That's a minimum regulatory requirement. at least annually for anyone operating a company vehicle. Again, that's the best practice and may also be required by your insurance carrier. And at least annually for anyone operating their own vehicle on behalf of the company. Remember, a lot can happen in 364 days. So do MVRs vary from state to state? Well, of course they do. And even though we're the United States, not all states report the same information in the same way on a consistent basis. Some states have different point values for the same violations. Some states don't even have specific violations in their statutes. So some states have a good Department of Motor Vehicle data. Others rely on aggregating criminal court clerk records data. So, for example, if you run an MVR in Hawaii, they don't really have a good DMV database to speak of. Everything comes from their court systems. So you may only learn that you have a valid license or not. You may get absolutely no data back on that MVR. Some states don't return a date of birth. Some don't return specific violations. So it really does vary from state to state. Then you've got different look-back periods. Some states go back 3, 5, 7, 10, or even a lifetime for some offenses like DUIs. Indiana, for example, goes back 20-plus years for all violations. Some states have reciprocity with other states, and some don't. For example, if you get a ticket in Texas, it probably won't show up on your record in Tennessee. And that's fortunate for me because that's where I live. Some violations from other states will never show up on an MVR if the licensed state doesn't have that statute. For example, if you're an Arizona licensed driver and you get a ticket in California for a cell phone violation, it's never going to show up on your Arizona MVR. They just don't have a statute for that particular thing. And you also need to make sure that you run the right type of MVR. For example, in Texas, you have to determine on the front end if you're running it for a CDL holder or a non-CDL holder. And if you run the wrong type of report, you will actually get back a no-hit. So that's another area to look out for. And then expungement cases that I mentioned, they're on the rise in a number of states, including Illinois and Pennsylvania, and places like Puerto Rico. So what can you do? Well, in addition to running full MVRs on all your employees, you should definitely consider monitoring. Remember, I said MVR tells a quick story, but unfortunately, MVRs alone don't tell the whole story. MVR monitoring provides monthly updates on license activity that you really need to know about. 19% of fatal accidents involve a driver with an invalid license. We call this unlicensed to kill in the transportation safety industry. And as Rich mentioned and I alluded to as well, once a year MVR poll is not enough. MVR monitoring helps fill the MVR gap, those 364 days between when you run the full MVR. Recently, a pharmaceutical company ran MVRs on 4,000 sales reps. 230 of them came back with invalid licenses. That's nearly 6% of their sales team. Now imagine if one of those people were involved in an at-fault accident with an invalid license. What do you think the consequences would be for the pharmaceutical company? In 2015, a record-breaking 102 people died on Austin, Texas roads, and according to the police records, 32 of the fatal crashes that year, last year, involved a driver with a suspended or an invalid license. And then a local news investigation did a follow-up study on that, and it revealed that 12,633 drivers were ticketed during that same period for driving without a valid license. And that's just one example. So fortunately, Driver's Alert has the most comprehensive MVR monitoring program in the industry. We're able to uncover those types of things for you in advance. And we allow you to catch license status changes and violations quickly, and we have a uniform scoring standard so violations are normalized for all the states. And our smart MVR program integrates with other Driver's Alert safety solutions like How's My Driving, GPS telematics, and training. So here's a coverage map. Driver's Alert has the most comprehensive coverage in the industry. We currently monitor monthly for 46 states. And for those 4 states that we currently don't have, we recommend running those MVRs more than once a year. Here's an example how Driver's Alert makes it very easy to manage your MVRs through our system. So our homepage are very easy to use, point and click. You're allowed to view and order MVRs. You can just click of the mouse, get your MVR order history. You can see your MVR monitoring dashboard. And you can also have access to the consent and release forms that you might need. So the employee list report shows you how you can select the entire organization, or you can select any group or even a specific location. And then you also have the ability to search on individual employees as well. So it makes it really easy to drill down in the organization where you need to look and where you want to run your MVR reports. And you can easily add a new employee from this screen as well. And our MVR summary list allows you to focus on the important trends in those drivers with the highest scores. You can easily search across the areas of your organization and focus on those particular locations or groups that you have an interest in reviewing. And here you can see the score and the relative risk level as well. And you can also save these reports electronically as PDF documents if you like. So this is an example of an MVR monitoring alert email. This is an automated email delivery. You specify who you want this to go to based on an MVR monitoring alert, and they're going to get this in their email inbox. And you have the ability to click and review a full MVR or an MVR monitoring report directly from this email without even having to log into the application. And you can also click and order a new MVR right from the email alert. So it makes it very convenient for you to have all of that at your fingertips in your email system without having to do anything. So you've got an MVR alert. Now what do? And really it's time to take action. What you want to do is to start by reviewing the MVR or the MVR monitoring report. You want to set up a coaching and counseling session and figure out, what happened, and then determine the next steps. And you may choose that you need to assign some training to that individual based on what happened. And you may also want to assign proactive training to others. Maybe you've spotted a trend and you want to make sure that everyone's aware of the risk and get that across your organization. Remember, you want to target the behavior you're trying to improve and not the people. So how to coach a driver, and really any employee for that matter. You want to do it in a positive way. You want to be constructive. You want to let them know that you're trying to help them improve their performance. You want to make it a two-way conversation. You don't want to monopolize the discussion. You want the driver to know that their feedback is needed and it's important. You also want to set clear benchmarks for improvement, and you want to quantify those as well. And of course, you want to assign training if that's appropriate response. So we have an easy interface to make the training assignment simple for you. We've integrated that with our other applications. And here you see you have the ability to assign training to John Speeder here. We're going to assign the speeding awareness small vehicle course for him. You can do it just by pointing and clicking in the application. And here's an example of what Joe Speeder's going to see. He's going to get an email alert if he's got an email account. If not, his supervisor will get a notice that he's gotten training assigned to him, and he'll have the ability to log into the system and take his training. So our brand new HTML5 content is the newest in the industry. We've got almost 50 courses that are specific to driver fleet safety programs, and all of this is done in an interactive and engaging format. It's very well designed from an instructional design perspective. We go through a classical instructional design where we tell them what we're going to train them on, we train them, we summarize the training, and then we have a training assessment at the end. So now it's very simple and easy to point and click and assign training specific to those types of violations. And the employee gets the benefit of having interactive and engaging brand new content. Here's an example of what John Speeder's going to get when he completes his training. And you can see that he passed with a score of a 100, and he's got a nice certificate that you can use for his personnel file and keep that electronically if you like, or you can print that out as well. So why use Driver's Alert for your MVR programs? Well, in addition to the things that I've just been going over, first and foremost, we're our industry knowledge and our expertise. I mean, we've been doing this stuff for 27 plus years, so we understand the idiosyncrasies between the states, and we've done all the heavy lifting for you on the front end. And we also have the comprehensive coverage you need with full MVRs for all 50 states, cover all U.S. territories, Washington, D.C., all the Canadian provinces. And it's fast, it's easy, it's cost effective. We've simplified the whole MVR review responsibilities by making the data easier to check and identify your high-risk drivers and intervene before losses occur. So traditionally, MVR reviewing was a very time-consuming, an arduous task, and especially for those fleet managers who are managing multi-fleet states. and who had to cope with the violation descriptions and differences from state to state, different penalties and point values that vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So we've simplified the MVR ordering process, offering access from a single source and a uniform scoring standard. Our MVR program can also be integrated with our other products and services to give you a more holistic solution. My driving program, our GPS telematics, and our training specific to the areas of concern that you're trying to address. So we have the most complete monitoring solution out there in the coverage in the industry. Here's an example of our Smart Risk Report, where we've integrated all our solution sets into one easy to look at and view scorecard. And you can see your calls if you're a How's My Driving subscribing customer, the GPS telematics events, any crashes that have taken place, your MVRs, and an overall risk score as well. Each column can be sorted so you can display your risks from worst to first and deal with those things that are important. And lastly, you can click on the last actions that were taken and link directly to those records as well as the training record. So it's a very intuitive user interface with a Smart Risk report right here. So basically putting it all together for you, Driver's Alert helps you to bridge the MVR gap. One and done is clearly not enough to mitigate your risks and protect your organization. You really need to run MVRs for everyone that operates a vehicle, either your company vehicle or on behalf of your organization. So you want to run an MVR as a baseline on all your employees and at least annually for your CDL holders. Remember, the value of an MVR isn't limited to just pre-hire screening or DOT regs. You can learn a lot about somebody from the MVR report and their MVR monitoring results. And we strongly recommend implementing monthly monitoring. Remember, a lot can happen in 364 days. And your MVR information varies from state to state, and you really need someone to help you decipher the differences, and that's what we've done for you. And a lack of awareness of a driver's violations or license status really isn't a good defense. You can imagine if one of those pharmaceutical sales reps had gotten in a fatal accident and you weren't aware of it. Do you think the courts, the juries would be tolerant or lenient because of that? Not really. So it's up to you to be proactive about your MVRs and to monitor all your drivers. And kind of our takeaway message is you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to try this at home or at work. And with that, I'm done with my part. I'm going to turn this back over to Rich, and we'll let him take it home from there. So, Rich?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Kirsch. Appreciate that. We're going to go ahead and open it up for questions. So if you have any questions regarding MVRs that you'd like to address, please go ahead and use our online chat feature, and we'll go ahead and address those as they come in. Give everybody just a handful of seconds here as the questions come in before we start addressing them. So we have first question here is how long does it take for a violation to show up on an MVR?
Well, that's a great question. Well, it really does, like everything else, vary from state to state. And first, that violation has to be adjudicated. So all those other delays and pretrial diversions and interventions and expungements, the violation has to be adjudicated before we can have any chance of seeing it. And then really, it varies so much. It could be days, weeks, or even months before it shows up on an MVR.
Okay, good. We also have a question addressing the coverage. So this in the presentation stated that Driver's Alert covers monitoring, I guess, in 46 of the states. So what is, can you clarify what is the issue really related to those remaining 4 states, and are those possible in the future to be covered under monitoring?
Yeah, absolutely. We're working on those other states. Unfortunately, each state is a little bit unique in terms of their capabilities and what they allow you to do. Some of them, rely strictly on court data records, and some have different databases that they're using and trying to aggregate that data. So we're certainly working on those, but what we recommend until we have those, that you do run a full MVR and run those multiple times throughout the year.
Okay, good. We have a question here related to cost, and this one is is there a cost per MVR? I guess he's really looking for what is the cost structure on the MVR monitoring? Is there an annual fee per driver? How is that structured?
Yeah, so on the monitoring side of things, it's basically $18 per person per year, and there's a small setup fee to get that started, and that's really to cover the cost of us setting it up with the different state databases that we access.
Okay, good. And this question is related to the timing, the time frame of completion. So how long does it take to complete an MVR from the time that the request is entered to the time you actually receive that report?
Yeah, that's another good question. Many states are instantaneous in terms of their turnaround time. It really is up to the state and the databases that you're accessing. Sometimes those instant databases aren't operating, so we'll continue to try those until the MVR order is actually completed. As a general rule, we like to say you need to consider waiting 2 or 3 days to have that. If you're in a Canadian province, sometimes that may take 2 to 3 weeks. And if you're dealing with Puerto Rico, for example, I think they're probably the longest turnaround time, and they're 8 to 9 weeks, and could be longer in hurricane season.
Okay, good. I think that's all the time we have for the questions. We did get quite a few. So what we will do, we've identified who's asked those questions, and we promise that we will get those addressed to you after the presentation is over. So don't worry about that. And I really do appreciate everyone's interest. There's quite a few questions. So what we'd like to do then is just kind of wrap up. Here's a slide just in case you'd like to follow up with us. You please use our 800 number or send us an email at sales@driversalert.com. We're going to send a follow-up email out very shortly here, which includes a link to a survey. Always appreciate everyone's feedback. It's a very short survey, but everyone on the management team here at Drivers Alert does review those results. We're always looking to see, what we're doing well and what do we need to do to improve on, because we're all here really with the same goal in mind, and that is to improve driver safety in your fleets. Also in that email will be a link to a recording of this presentation, as well as an introduction to our customer referral program at Drivers Alert.